Before dawn, on the 30th of April 1943, a sardine fisherman off the southern coast of Spain saw something in the water. It was a man. A British officer in full uniform, life jacket still strapped to his chest. He had been in the sea for days. Chained to his wrist was a black government briefcase, and inside it were the secret plans for the Allied invasion of Europe. Within weeks, those plans would reach the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. He would believe every word, and he would move his armies to the wrong country. There was only one problem with the officer carrying the most important secret of the war. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't even alive when his mission began. This is the story of Operation Mincemeat, the most audacious deception in military history, and the forgotten dead man who made it work. To understand the lie, you first have to understand the trap the Allies were caught in. By May 1943, the Axis had been beaten out of North Africa. Hundreds of thousands of Allied troops now stood on the southern shore of the Mediterranean, looking north, toward Hitler's Europe. But between them and Europe lay the sea, and to cross it they needed a stepping stone. One island sat in the exact center of the map, guarding the way to Italy itself, Sicily. It was the only logical target, and that was precisely the danger. Winston Churchill summed it up in a single sentence. Everyone but a bloody fool would know it's Sicily. If it was obvious to the Allies, it was obvious to the enemy. German engineers were already pouring concrete along Sicily's beaches, digging in guns and moving divisions south. A landing against a fully prepared defender could turn the beaches into a graveyard. Tens of thousands of men could die before they ever got off the sand. The Allies could not change the target. Sicily had to be the target. So instead, they set out to do something far harder, to make Hitler stop believing his own eyes. The work of deception fell to a secret body in London known only by two letters: the 20 Committee. In Roman numerals, double cross. Their job was to feed the enemy lies so carefully built that they would be mistaken for the truth. Two men would drive Operation Mincemeat. The first was Ewan Montague, a sharp, aristocratic naval intelligence officer with a barrister's mind for detail. The second was Charles Cholmondeley, a tall, eccentric RAF officer with a gift for impossible ideas. Together, they were an unlikely pair of undertakers. Their plan sounded like the plot of a cheap thriller. Take a dead body, dress it as an officer, fill its pockets with false secrets, and let the enemy fish it out of the sea. It was grotesque. It depended on 100 things going right. And if even one detail rang false, the Germans would realize they were being played, and do the exact opposite of what the Allies wanted. They knew the stakes. A clumsy lie wouldn't just fail. It would tell Hitler exactly where the real blow was coming. The seed of the idea came from an unlikely source. A memo written years earlier, comparing the deception of an enemy to the patient art of fly fishing for trout. It listed dozens of tricks to bait an enemy. Buried among them was number 28, a suggestion to plant misleading papers on a dead body and let the other side find it. The memo carried the fingerprints of naval intelligence and of a young officer on the Admiral's staff named Ian Fleming. A decade later, he would invent James Bond. For years the idea sat unused. It was too strange, too gruesome, too uncertain. But in 1943, with the whole invasion of Europe at stake, strange and gruesome suddenly looked like genius. The committee approved it and gave it a deliberately grim code name, Mincemeat. The hunt for a body began. The plan needed a corpse that could pass for a man who had drowned or died of exposure at sea. That was harder than it sounds. The body had to be fresh enough and undamaged enough to survive a doctor's examination. The search fell to a coroner who quietly helped the operation. And in his mortuary lay a man who fit. His name was Glyndwr Michael, a poor, homeless Welshman with no family to ask questions, who had died after swallowing rat poison. In life, the world had given him almost nothing. In death, he would be handed a secret mission that could shorten the greatest war in history. The officers who took his body understood the weight of what they were doing. They treated him with a strange, careful reverence. They could not tell anyone who he really was, not for decades. To the world, and to the enemy, this nameless man was about to become somebody entirely new. They packed his body in dry ice to preserve it, and began the most painstaking forgery of the war. The creation of a man who had never lived. They gave him a name, chosen to blend in. William Martin, common enough among Royal Marine officers to vanish into a crowd. They gave him a rank with just enough weight to be trusted with secrets, but not so much that anyone would expect to recognize his face. Captain, acting major. Then they hit their first problem. To photograph a dead man for an identity card is to photograph a dead man. The eyes are wrong. The face is slack. No live officer looks like that. So they searched the offices of intelligence until they found a living man who looked enough like the corpse and used his face on the card instead. Major Martin needed a backstory tight enough to survive interrogation by the cleverest minds in German intelligence. So they built him a life, birthplace, career, the units he had served in, the work he was supposedly doing. But a file is not a man. To breathe life into a corpse, they needed something no forger thinks to fake. They needed the small, useless, intimate clutter of an actual human being. They gave Major Martin a fiancée. They called her Pam. For her photograph, they used a real young woman who worked in intelligence, her smile now part of a dead man's pocket. They wrote love letters in her voice, not spy letters, real ones, nervous, tender, a little possessive. A woman worrying about a man going off to war. They added a receipt for an engagement ring he had stretched to afford, and a stern letter from his bank complaining about the overdraft the ring had caused. Then came the rest of the debris of a life. Used theatre tickets, dated to prove he had been in London days earlier. Bus tickets. A book of stamps, a silver cross. A receipt from his club. A scolding letter from his father about settling down. Spies call it wallet litter. The tiny, boring details a forger would never invent, which is exactly why, when an enemy finds them, they shout, "This man was real." Piece by piece, a homeless man with no future became a decorated officer with a sweetheart, a temper, money troubles, and a life worth believing in. All of it fiction, all of it perfect. The wallet made Major Martin real. The briefcase made him deadly. Inside it, the team placed a letter between two senior British generals, written not as an order, but as a chatty, off-the-record note between colleagues who trusted each other. Casually, almost in passing, the letter revealed that the real Allied targets were Greece and Sardinia, and that the coming attack on Sicily was nothing more than a feint, a trick to pull German forces away from the true blow. It was the truth, turned perfectly inside out. The genuine plan dressed up as the decoy. The decoy presented as the genuine plan. To explain why a mere major was carrying letters between generals, they gave him a cover errand and chained the case to his body, exactly as a courier guarding something priceless would. On the 19th of April 1943, the canister holding Major Martin was loaded aboard a submarine, HMS Seraph, under a cover story even her own crew half believed. For 10 days, she ran south through dangerous waters, carrying her silent passenger toward the coast of Spain. Their destination was the Sea off Huelva, chosen for one cold reason. The Allies knew it crawled with German spies, and that anything found there would travel straight to Berlin. Before sunrise on the 30th of April, the crew brought the body up onto the casing. They removed it from the canister, fixed the briefcase, and checked the life jacket one final time. The captain read a few quiet words over the body, a burial at sea for a man who was already serving his country in death. Then they slipped him into the water and let the tide carry the lie toward the shore. The body washed ashore and was recovered by Spanish authorities. Spain was officially neutral, but its sympathies and many of its officials leaned toward Berlin. A local German agent moved quickly. The briefcase and its documents were quietly passed to the Abwehr, German military intelligence, who photographed every page before the papers were returned. To make the bait irresistible, the British played their part. They sent urgent, anxious messages demanding the briefcase back, exactly the panic the Germans would expect over genuinely secret papers. Every move reinforced the illusion. The harder London seemed to want the documents back, the more certain Berlin became that they were real. In Berlin, the documents landed in front of analysts whose entire job was to smell a forgery. They went over every detail. They checked the love letters from Pam, the bank's complaint, the theatre tickets, dated to the very days Major Martin was supposedly alive in London. Every thread held. A few were uneasy. The find was almost too convenient. But the sheer weight of human detail buried the doubt. No one, they reasoned, would fake a man this completely. The verdict travelled up the chain. The documents were genuine. The Allies were coming for Greece and Sardinia. Sicily was a bluff. And then the report reached the one man whose belief mattered more than anyone's. Adolf Hitler was convinced. So convinced that he overruled his own commanders, who still suspected Sicily. He ordered Greece, Sardinia and Corsica reinforced. He sent one of his most trusted field marshals to take command in Greece. He moved an entire panzer division across Europe, away from the real battlefield. Mines were laid, guns were dug in, and thousands of soldiers stood ready on Greek beaches, waiting for an invasion that would never come. In London, the deceivers waited. Then a single confirmation arrived and was passed to Churchill himself. It read, "Mincemeat swallowed whole." On the 9th of July 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the real invasion of Sicily. They came ashore against defences far thinner than they had feared. The German reserves that should have met them were hundreds of miles away, still guarding Greece. Sicily fell in just 38 days. And even as it fell, Hitler clung to the lie, still half convinced the island was a diversion and the real attack was yet to come. No one can count the exact number of lives a dead man saved that summer, but it was measured in the thousands. Operation Mincemeat was buried in silence. For years afterward, even the man who ran it could not reveal who the body truly was. Major William Martin was buried with full military honours in Spain, saluted as a hero, mourned by a fiancée who never existed, by an enemy who had been fooled to the end. For half a century, his headstone carried only the false name. Then at last, the truth was added in stone. The body belonged to Glyndŵr Michael, a forgotten, penniless man who, in death, helped change the course of the war. Operation Mincemeat proved a cold and lasting truth about war. The deadliest weapon is not always the bomb or the bullet. Sometimes it is simply a story, told so well that the enemy stakes his armies on believing it. If you want more of the strange, brilliant tricks that decided history's wars, subscribe. The truth so often is stranger than anything a spy could invent.